This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm joined by
Chris Whaley.
And once again, we're coming at you and we're looking at life from a Christian worldview and allowing that to clash into the culture around us. And one of the things, Chris, we try to get people to understand is we want people to look at life through a lens of a Christian worldview because it turns out so much better, so much different.
So much better.
Yeah. Now, I think today, this is going to be a very special episode for our folks, and we say that a lot, so we're going to overuse it. It's a very special episode for our folks.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about the Masked Saint a little bit, your career a little bit, and kind of how God has kind of taken that and woven that into, who you are today and how that impacts our viewers today.
Right.
If you wouldn't mind. So, as we do, if you don't know, we'll say it again. This is Chris Whaley, also known as the Masked Saint from his wrestling days. Chris, tell us a little bit about your early life and what kind of got you on page to pursue professional wrestling.
Okay. I actually, Jeff had a crazy life growing up. My mom was a Jehovah's Witness.
Okay.
She was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and she had a lot of questions that were never answered. Asked her dad about, questions, and he said, "That's not for you to know." And my mom and dad moved to Central Florida. My dad was a long-distance truck driver, and he was gone a lot. And one day there was a pastor out knocking on doors, and he knocked on our door. And my mom said, "I've been praying for somebody like you for a long time." And she invited him in, sat at the dinner table. She asked all those questions, and before he left, she prayed and asked Christ to come into her heart, which is very unusual. I mean, 1 in a million where a Jehovah's Witness turns to Christ. And so my mom started taking us to church, and I had a lot of health problems as a kid. I was constantly in and out of the hospital, mostly with pneumonia. In the 4th grade, I had polio, viral encephalitis. I was in the hospital for 3 months. I used to say that my folks bought the 2nd floor in the hospital over in Winter Haven, Florida. But just constantly back and forth into the hospital. But I had a wonderful, godly doctor who just refused to give up on me. They sent me over to a clinic in Lakeland, Florida. They did a lot of tests on me and found out that I was allergic to just about everything. And that was a problem. So he put me on this allergy medication. And amazingly, my body started to change. I started putting on weight. And that doctor, Dr. Raymond A. LaRue, who was over in Winter Haven, Florida, it was the one that suggested I start going to a gym, start working out with weights and exercising. And so he got me into that. And when I went to the gym, it was just something that I enjoy. I still enjoy it. And so my body started to change. Met my wife when I was 16. We got married while we were in college. Graduated from college together. We're living in Central Florida, and I was in the best shape of my life. And I love working with the weights, and so my body was in real good shape. And as a kid, I loved professional wrestling. When you're in the hospital and you lose track of your nights and your days, and 3 o'clock in the morning you turn the TV on, it's amazing. Professional wrestling was on.
Sure.
So I watched professional wrestling, grew up here in Florida, watching Eddie Graham, the great Malenko, Johnny Valentine, Red Bastien, Joe Scarpa. And so I was just, enamored with professional wrestling. And as I grew older, that did not stop. I continued to watch professional wrestling. until living in Central Florida. My wife was a high school math teacher at her alma mater, and I was just working, looking for the opportunity to go serve in a church as a youth minister. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Jeff, I was the world's worst youth minister. I was terrible. I was terrible. But I'm sitting in my chair, I'm looking at the Tampa Tribune, and there was an ad. It said, "Wanted professional wrestlers." I jumped up out of my seat, took it over to my wife, said, "Look at this." And she was grading papers, and she looked at it and went, and then went back to grading papers. But I immediately went in, packed a bag, and drove over to Tampa, Florida. And I walked into the gym, and there was the great Malenko.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I watched this guy as a kid, and I was scared to death of him as a kid, but he was one of the greatest guys in the world. And so he taught me a lot with other professional wrestlers. We interviewed Mark Merrow. He trained Mark Merrow. Okay. So I just, the moment that I got into the ring, I was hooked. I loved it from the minute that I started, and I just, I worked for about 6 months, and I had my first match against the grappler, and that was it. I just couldn't wait to get in the ring every time.
Well, now, but somewhere in that journey, though, you made a decision, and again, I've never actually asked you this before. What led you to put on a hood and create the persona of the Masked Saint?
I'm so glad you asked me. Jeff, I finally got that call, and I was a youth minister at a church in Central Florida. And you know as well as I do, they do not pay youth ministers very much.
They don't?
No.
Oh.
My wife was pregnant with our first child, and so she could not go back to school. And in those days, you didn't get paid if you weren't there. And so I'm making $12,000 a year, and we are starving. So I went to the senior pastor, who I never got along with, and I said, "Hey, listen, I could wrestle a couple of nights a week, and it would really help our family financially." And he, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to turn this church into a circus. And so I said, okay. And that Saturday, I was home watching professional wrestling, and there's a buddy of mine that worked, we called it a hood. He's working with a hood, which was a mask, and the light went off. I said, that's it. I said, I could come up with a gimmick, wear a mask, I could wrestle a couple of nights a week, wasn't doing anything illegal, wasn't doing anything bad, wasn't taking time away from the church. I could work and provide for my family. And so I was thinking, what kind of a gimmick would I have? And I said, well, I'm a pastor. How about the saint? So my sister actually made my first mask. My second mask I bought from K&H Wrestling up in Youngstown, Ohio. But I had my white mask, white trunks, white tights, white boots, a white cape. And so I became the ultimate good guy in the ring. I was the saint. And so I'm working a couple of nights a week. And it was kind of funny because I would come into the office and I'd have a black eye from getting my nose broke. Or bruises, they'd say, "What in the world happened to you?" And I said, "I fell down," which was true.
You did.
I had a lot of help falling down, but I fell down. Okay. So here I am working a couple of nights a week until I got fired from that church. Only time I've ever been fired in my life. But I eventually was let go, which was good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because it really was God's plan for me to get fired. But I'm, working a couple nights a week wrestling, and the church didn't know it. That's how it happened.
So the persona of the Masked Saint, then, you just kind of just take that and carry it with you then. That became the character.
The Saint. Okay. Yeah, the Saint, yeah.
Now, did you ever wrestle as Chris Whaley or under another name?
Oh, yeah. When I first got into wrestling, I wrestled under my name, Chris Whaley. I wrestled as Chris Samuels. Of course, in my book, The Masked Saint is Chris Samuels. Mm-hmm. But I wrestled as Chris Hawkins, Chris Whaley, Chris Samuels. So I did that really early part because I became the Saint pretty pretty soon after that.
So if anybody writes you, they can just call you by any of those names, and they're okay.
Yeah,
right?
just call me anything. Right.
Well, by being, though, the saint, once you took on that persona, how did that work with some of the, I guess, promoters that you were working with that were running the shows and stuff? I mean, you walk in with this good guy persona. You just had to be a good guy, right?
Right.
Was that a problem?
No, wasn't a problem at all because they always have enough bad guys, the heels. Yeah. So, no, I mean, they love having the perennial good guy going up against the perennial bad guy. That was a great match.
Now, did the saint ever saint turn heel at all?
I did.
Okay.
When I first went to Texas, they didn't know who I was there in Texas. That was in the day of the regional where you had territories. And so they needed a heel for a couple of nights, and I'll do it, because it's a lot more fun working heel. So I said, well, I got to, if you're going to be a good heel, you got to make the people hate you. So that was when Tom Landry, his last couple of years, and the Cowboys were not doing so well. Right. So first night I got into the ring, I grabbed the microphone, and I said, with the lady with the 11 snot-nosed kids that dropped them off at Texas Stadium, please go pick them up. They're beating the Cowboys 14-0. Oh, man. I mean, they were throwing ice and cups and anything they could throw into the ring. I mean, I had to have a police escort to get me back to the dressing room. Yeah. And the next night in Fort Worth, I leaned over the ropes and I looked at the people. I said, hey, you know what's 15 feet long, got 3 teeth, and an IQ of 14? And they're looking at me. And I said, the front row at a wrestling match in Fort Worth, Texas. Pew! Went right over there.
Didn't get it, right?
Okay. Didn't even get it.
They're still trying to figure that out right now. Someone's watching who's going to go, wait, I was there that night.
I was there that night.
I heard him say that's what, he was insulting me. Yeah. Way to go, Chris.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Nice. Well, now, when did the transition come then to say it's time to quit wrestling and get serious about the pastoring world, if you will, which is a whole different kind of wrestling. But when and how did that finally happen for you?
Yeah, my last 3 years in wrestling was when I was in Texas. The reason I was in Texas is because I was going to seminary at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, where you also graduated from. And
known as the Holy Hump.
Yep, the Holy Hump. There you go. So I graduated from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in May of 1988. And when I graduated from seminary, I went to my first church. And so I went from professional wrestling to becoming a pastor.
So you went from wrestling wrestlers to wrestling deacons in the church.
And a lot of other people.
There you go. Okay, well that's stuff that I didn't know all that stuff. That's part of the journey that Chris has been on. Each of you are on a journey as well, and we're going to come back after this break, and we're going to talk about more of Chris's journey, how his life story became part of a book and a film, and what he's done since then. So we're going to come back and do that in just a moment, right after this break. Hi, thanks for not leaving during the break because, well, I'm obviously trying to get you to buy something. I really am. If you're anything like me, middle of summer, sometimes it gets really hot. We film here in Florida, it's hot all the time. And every once in a while, you'd like to take a little bit of a break, get a little Christmas spirit going in your life. If so, I have a suggestion for you. I have written a novella based upon the characters that show up in my novels. It's called Then Christmas Happens. It's available in the exclusive paperback edition, the collectible hardback edition, or if you're lazy like I am and you want someone to read to you, you can also get this book on Audible in about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. Hear it, read it, and get a little Christmas magic happening in your life. To get it, you have to go to Amazon, look up My Name Jeff Dixon, and then let Christmas happen in your life. Hey, you came back. Thanks for not leaving and checking out during the break. Now that you're back, we're going to continue our conversation with my co-host, my friend, my fellow pastor, Chris Whaley, also known as the Masked Saint. Now, in our first segment, we were talking about kind of how you got into wrestling and then really out of wrestling. Mm-hmm. In this segment, though, we come back and you wrote a book entitled The Masked Saint about your life, but also going to kind of put it into a fictional book.
Right.
And when did you decide to do that?
Well, when I went to my first church, you know as well as I do, Jeff, that they teach you a lot of things in seminary. They teach you languages, they teach you history, teach you New Testament, Old Testament, education, so many things, but they don't teach you how to be a pastor. So I went to my first church, and soon I found out there were some people that were being abused. Had a young lady that would come to our church. She'd drop her children off at our children's program. She'd come into the sanctuary. Usually, she was the last one in the sanctuary, and she was the first one to leave. And so on one particular Sunday, she came and she had sunglasses on, which is a little unusual, not today, but in those days it was. And on that particular Sunday, as I'm standing at the front shaking hands with people, she was the last person to go out. And when she came up, she took my hand with both of her hands, and she had her head down, and I could see tears going down her cheeks. And so I lifted her sunglasses, and she had 2 black eyes. And it just enraged me when I saw that. And I said, who did this? Did your husband do this? And she said, yes. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to go see this guy. And she was like, no, he'll hurt you. And I said, I'm not worried about it. So I went to their house and called the guy out. Said, anybody that would hit a woman is a dirtbag. I mean, you're hitting the mother of your children. And so I came here to see how you do against somebody who's able to fight back, because you're obviously a bully, and bullies only pick on people that they know they can defeat. And so I got to dance with him in the front yard, and it was awesome. I mean, pastors, as you know, we don't have a lot of opportunities to get rid of our stress. Mm-hmm. And so I got rid of a lot of stress that day.
Great.
And then, amazingly, it just seemed that I had episode after episode where I'm handling things more as a professional wrestler than I am as a pastor. And so after a bunch of those, I was thinking, I said, this would make a good TV series. Because Michael Landon was one of my heroes, Little House on the Prairie, Highway to Heaven. And there's just nothing good and moral on mainstream TV anymore. If they have a show about a family, it's usually a dysfunctional family. Sure. The father is a bumbling boob, the mother is promiscuous, and the children are rebellious. And I thought, this would be another good moral program with a good ending on it. And so for a long time, I didn't think I was an author. I couldn't write, and I couldn't find a ghostwriter until the personal computer came out. One day, on a Saturday, I was sitting there, and I started writing, and I got through, printed it off, showed it to my wife, and she said, that's great, keep going. So The Masked Saint was really easy for me to write because each chapter is based upon something that actually happened in my life. And so, The Masked Saint got published, and soon after that, I got a call from a movie producer right here in Orlando. He was the producer of the first 3 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies, mm-hmm. which were all blockbusters. Sure. And then he did a movie with Jim Caviezel called Stroke of Genius. And then he did a faith-based movie called Letters to God. And so he was looking for another faith-based movie. So he called me in and stayed on the table with him for about a year, and he suddenly changed his mind and said no. But during that time, I met a lot of other people in the movie business. I had a producer from Canada that flew down, met me at Disney World, and he is the one who eventually made the Masked Saint book into a movie.
And for a lot of people, that may be where they first encountered your life story. Of course, you were in the movie. If you think back, if you haven't read the book, you need to read the book. If you haven't seen the movie, you need to see the movie. Let's fast forward. I mean, we're going to skip a lot here. Okay. But let's fast forward to making the movie.
Right.
You went to Canada to film the motion picture. What memories do you have of that process? I mean, you're an author. This is your life. You got actors and actresses playing you, your family.
Right.
What was that like? I mean, what do you remember about that?
It was very surreal. It was, something that's really just amazing when you go there. I mean, I got off the plane in Canada, and there's somebody with a sign that's got a picture of the Masked Saint on it, and had my name underneath it. And so we got off the plane. I said, "Oh, I guess you're looking for me." And they take you to the hotel.
Did you wear the mask on the plane?
No, I did not.
Okay, just checking. I just wanted to make sure.
You could wear masks now, but you couldn't in those
Okay,
days. Yeah.
all right.
But anyway, they would pick you up at 6:30 in the morning when they started filming. But just great memories. Rowdy Piper, you WWF fans remember Piper's Pit. Roddy Piper, he was in a lot of movies. He was in that movie They Live, which has a cult following. Sure. Wrestled against Piper 25 years before this. And I knew he wouldn't remember me because, I was one of those guys that got his brains beat out for a little bit. But, oh, yeah, brother, I remember you. Yeah, he didn't remember me. But anyway, it was great for a month, getting to spend a month with Roddy Piper. The beautiful actress, Diane Carroll. She was an Academy Award nominee. Sure. Beautiful voice, singer. She played the part of Miss Edna. The guy, James Preston Rogers, that plays the Reaper on there.
Big dude.
A big dude. He reminded me of a young Undertaker. So the young lady that plays my daughter, T.J. McGibbon, she's been in so many movies. The young lady that plays my wife, Laura Jean Chorstecki, she's a beautiful actress, and she's been in a bunch of stuff. So, now when I'm watching something, he was in The Masked Saint, or she was in The Masked Saint. Then that's kind of neat.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, now that you've done that, I mean, again, and you can spend all your life and never get a chance to talk to somebody who's written a book, had that book made into a movie that's based on their life. I mean, that's one of the odds. So, for our guest here, as you look back over all that now, what is the thing you would like for them to take away from that story? I mean, what's the big takeaway for life application?
Right. I think it's that God is the God of a second chance. Because I really messed things up. Being a pastor, kind of a Christian vigilante. I tell people I was the equalizer before Denzel and Queen Latifah. So you mess some things up, but yet we serve an amazing God who is able to work even in spite of our flaws and our shortcomings, and that's the story of my life. I am not the greatest Christian in the book, not the greatest person in the book, but in spite of all that I've been through, God has, in every instance, has still been able to use me again and give me a second chance on so many things. So
what advice would Chris Whaley today give to a younger Chris Whaley back in your teenage high school years?
I think I would have studied harder when I was in school. Neither one of my parents had an education. My dad had a third grade education. He was a fifth degree redneck. My mom, she had a seventh grade education. So education was not pushed in my household. And when you don't have somebody pushing you, you tend to, slack off a little bit. Okay. So, when I got to college, I actually learned grammar by taking Greek, because you have to, learn the Greek grammar and all. So I would tell young people, study all you can and do the best you can to make something out of your life. And with a good education, that certainly helps.
Well, and if you don't study, you might be able to write your own book and have a movie made about your life, I guess. I mean, you kind of break the mold a little bit, don't you?
But also, if you've never accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, that's the place to begin. Sure. Because He can change your life and make it into something wonderful.
Well, who along the way, I mean, now as you're kind of thinking about it, who have been the biggest spiritual influences for you or mentors that you've had along the way in this journey?
Now, as a child, and she's in the book, that was the one thing that I didn't like about the movie is that Miss Edna, who is played by Diane Carroll, they brought her up to real time, but she was actually from my childhood. And just about every chapter in my book, there's a moral lesson that I learned from her. She was just the most precious lady. And, and it's really incredible because this is back in the 60s. And in the 60s, for, a white kid to have a black mentor, that was
Unusual. Yeah.
That was unusual. Mm-hmm. So she was just a great influence in my life, a great Christian influence, and really was the first one pushing me towards Christ. But also, one of the biggest spiritual mentors for me was Dr. Jess Moody, who is the pastor of First Baptist West Palm. He's the one that led me to the Lord, one that ordained me into the ministry. And so he was just a wonderful, wonderful influence. He's the guy that started Palm Beach Atlantic University. And so I would have to say Dr. Jess Moody and Miss Edna.
We sit here today, everybody's life is a journey. Mm-hmm. And the experiences and the moments for you, you were able to share those with us, and that ripple effect of that has influenced people and changed their life. Mm-hmm. But I think for our audience too, their lives, whether their lives are written in a book or not, whether they make a movie about their life or not, they're certainly impacting the world around them. And so I just take to heart the fact that you were able to share your journey. You get to see a little bit of the impact that you have. But I also want to encourage our audience, because your journey is having an impact. Who you are, what you do, how you live, really does matter. And you are changing lives along the way. And so we wanted you to get a chance to get to know Chris just a little bit better. We talk about it, we joke about it, we talk about wrestling a lot. But there's a whole complicated, complex weaving of time and life and everything in your story. And so thanks for sharing that today.
Thank you.
Anything before we sign off and say goodbye this week, except, of course, come back next week and watch us again. But any advice you have for our listeners today?
Well, don't give up on your dreams. I would have never imagined as a kid, especially one that was constantly sick and in and out of the hospital, that I would ever have the opportunity to do what I did, to get in the ring with 4 world champions, to get in the ring with The Undertaker and The Ultimate Warrior, Bruiser Brody and the Freebirds. And to do that is just, remarkable. So don't give up on your dreams. You have something that you've always wanted to do. Don't let anything stop you from doing it.
I'm going to summarize that. I'm going to steal your line. Don't tap out. How about that?
That's great.
We look forward to joining you next time here on
The Clash.